Something was terribly wrong when a powerful tiger became listless, refusing to stand or move. When the vet saw the ultrasound, he reacted with visible shock, his face turning pale. Was this a rare disease, or was it a result of inadequate care? Was it the lack of space to move? Could the poor diet have created a situation where the animal refused to get up? But before we start our story, smash the like button now. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any new stories. When pictures of a giant tiger in bad shape show up online, veterinarian Charles immediately needs to examine the animal. Mainly because people who know more about the zoo it is located know that this is not caused by overfeeding. There had to be something else going on, and Charles was dying to find out. When the vet finally got the chance to examine the tiger, he was shocked by his discovery. When veterinarian Charles finally got into the enclosure with the giant tiger, the animal barely even paid attention to him. It looked weak and seemed completely unable to move from its spot. Charles swallowed his nerves and started to examine the creature. It quickly became clear to him that the speculations had been right. This was not a case of overfeeding at all. There was something else going on with this animal, something that Charles had seen before, but never this extreme. He knew that there was no time to lose if he wanted to give this animal any chance of surviving. He noticed that the animal was getting worse and worse. He had to act right now. He just hoped that he was not too late. But what caused this tiger to get so big? What did Charles find when examining it and would be able to save this poor creature? Visitors had been speaking up about their concern for a while now, but it seemed like the employees of the privatized zoo just did not care about their tiger. The staff completely ignored the comments. They said it was common for a tiger to be this fat. Just like all the other creatures in the zoo spend their days in a relatively small enclosure, and it was not normal for them to look unmotivated. They are simply not used to anything else. The tiger named Toothy had recently gained an enormous amount of weight, and now it even seemed like it was not moving around the enclosure at all anymore. All the tiger did was lie down for whole days, hours at a time. It looked like a classic case of overfeeding to most of the visitors seeing the tiger, but people who knew a little bit more about the zoo and its owners knew that this was very unlikely to be the case. Strange things do happen often in this zoo. The owners were notorious for cutting costs wherever they could, so the chances of them allowing their employees to waste so much food on an animal that was already this big was very slim. There had to be something else wrong here, but most visitors that came to the zoo did not care enough to find it out. And with the employees not caring either, there seemed to be little hope for the tiger. Until someone showed up. One day, an off-duty police officer took his kids to the zoo as they wanted to see all the animals so bad. He was not a fan of the concept, but for his kids' happiness, he was willing to make an exception. But what he saw horrified him. The cage, small enclosure, poor living conditions, and bad health of some of the animals brought tears to his eyes. And when he saw the tiger, it pushed him over the edge. He felt that it was his duty to do something about the animal's situation. The next day at work, he immediately opened up an investigation into the zoo to see if he could get it to shut down on the basis of neglect or even animal cruelty. Because investigating a zoo is a big task, he asked a colleague to help him along. He had made pictures on his trip that he was going to use as evidence, and at some point, these actually got published. And mainly the picture of the tiger got a lot of attention online. The photo of the fat tiger goes viral on the internet. The photo was accompanied by the story that the animal could not stand up and that its size most likely did not come from overfeeding. This raised even more questions online. It was the main topic of discussion in the largest online forums, and all this eventually got the attention of a vet who was located fairly close to the zoo, and he was shocked by the picture of the tiger. But he was also extremely curious as to what could have caused this unbelievable increase in size. On the website of the zoo, there was also pictures of all the animal, and they were about a year old. But in those pictures, the tiger in question was still very much normal looking. So he can only have gotten so fat in the last 12 months. How could such a dramatic increase in size possibly happen in a year's time when apparently the animal had been dramatically overfed? The vet, who was named Charles, decided to call the zoo to get some more info. He was somewhat surprised when a police officer answered the phone. Apparently, the case against the zoo had already taken shape very much, and the police had closed down the zoo. The investigation was in full swing. They were in the process of collecting evidence to make the case against the owner stronger, and the animal was being taken care of by professionals they employed. In addition, the zoo's owner was just not happy that the zoo had to close. There were a lot of animals that needed medical help, and all of them needed to be transferred to a new home, as this zoo could not house any of them humanly. Here is where Charles saw an opportunity to get a closer look at the tiger. As a self-employed vet himself, he offered to come to help out at the zoo with the animals. an offer which the police gladly accepted as they could use all the help they could get. They could put the man's years of experience to good use. Charles traveled to the zoo that very same afternoon, and although he was intent on helping as many animals as possible, he had to admit that his first focus was very much on the tiger. He thought there was no time to waste. When he arrived, he got briefed by the vet actually leading the efforts to help the animals. He seemed really optimistic, but his expression changed when Charles asked about the tiger. He began to look a little hopeless. They had not yet gotten around to checking the animal out, and in all honesty, it also was not high on their list of priorities. They actually already kind of gave up on the animal after seeing what state it was in. When Charles finally got to examine the tiger, he figured out that it had actually swallowed a heap of plastic which was making it sick. Luckily, removing it was a quick fix for the problem, and after a month of recovery, the animal was back to full health. Charles was in a pickle. Although he had anticipated the situation, he couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. He had been looking forward to getting a closer look at the infamous tiger, but that would not be possible, at least not yet. The attending vet had other plans. According to the vet, the zoo had been incredibly lax in their treatment of all the animals. There were far too many animals that would need to have priority care before he would attend to the tiger. This had not been part of Charles' plan, but it was clear he didn't have much of a choice in the matter. As a vet himself, he had an ethical responsibility to all the animals. Charles nodded and turned to assist the main vet in any way that he could. He was assigned to perform health checks on all the animals that needed to be transported out that day. This would end up taking about 2 hours of his time. Finally, the priority animals had been sent out to their new homes, and the last of the remaining animals would be leaving in the following days. Charles was finally free to do what he had set his mind on. Waving goodbye to the volunteers and staff as they headed home for the day, Charles smiled to himself. It was finally time. Charles was very excited, but he couldn't shake off the growing feeling of fear. Regardless of how weak the animal was, it was still a wild animal. He knew he would have to be as patient and calm as possible to avoid agitating the tiger. This was a level of risk that none of the other staff or volunteers were willing to take on. Everyone else had resigned themselves to the death of the tiger. Charles was more than aware that he would indeed be treating the tiger alone. A very admirable and selfless decision to make. Charles walked slowly, not wanting to alert the tiger. However, the tiger ignored Charles' entire presence in the cage. This caused him to wonder if the animal had passed away already, but seconds later he watched as the tiger took a deep breath. Charles sighed in relief. Now he would have to get closer. Approaching the tiger slowly, Charles made slow but visible movements to calm the tiger, but nothing seemed to faze the animal. It was clear that his presence had been acknowledged, but the tiger didn't seem interested in it either. Charles counted himself lucky. Although he wasn't certain if the tiger was genial or too weak to attack, he began his assessment by taking quick scans and feels of the tiger, concentrating on the bloated stomach. Its size was far more daunting in person. The swelling was so large that it was preventing Charles from making a sound judgment of the animal's vitals. So far, the only thing he could confirm was that the swelling was not entirely due to fatty tissue, meaning it was likely something external causing the bloating. Whatever was causing the bloating had clearly been piling up for far longer than he had initially suspected. This made the situation more dire than Charles was comfortable with. It didn't take long. While he was feeling for unusual pressure in the tiger, Charles quickly noted something that alarmed him slightly. Instead, it was what Charles observed in his surroundings, or rather, what he did not see that left the young vet puzzled. The areas below and around the tiger were clean, suspiciously so for an animal that had been unable to move in months. It was now clear to Charles that the problem was a digestive issue, or rather the inability to defecate. Was something blocking the intestine? There was only one way to find out: surgery. Charles wasn't fazed by the results. Plus, all the tools he would need for the surgery were in his medical mobile for such emergencies. Sedating an animal the size of a tiger would require a large dosage which could prove fatal to an animal in such a weakened state, especially when he would be performing the risk operation alone. Charles debated the idea for a bit longer until a thought struck him. The tiger's condition would only worsen, which meant every moment that passed made the life risk higher. If he wanted the tiger to survive the risky operation, he would need to act immediately because every second mattered. Charles knew what he had to do. Wasting no time, he quickly injected the large tiger with the sedative. It only took a couple minutes before the effects of the drug kicked in and the tiger was fast asleep, but most importantly, immobile. Once the tiger's breathing had stabilized, Charles carefully made the first incision. Although it had been a while since his days in veterinary school, Charles was a little familiar with the anatomy of a tiger. It also helped that he had done a quick catch-up study on the specific breed of tiger the night before. Charles knew exactly what he needed to do to get to the blockage and ease the pain. It was a nerve-wracking procedure, but Charles moved with precision. It didn't take long before he made his way to the base of what was likely causing the problem, the stomach lining that led to the tiger's bowels. There he found massive swelling. The animal's stomach had stretched and was saturated with unreleased feces. The expanded stomach was causing an outside bloating and creating hard spots across the animal's bowels. Charles could see that there was something beyond the culminated waste that was causing the blockage in the first place. Charles wagered that the tiger had likely eaten something that it shouldn't have. This was not too uncommon with unsupervised cages. Charles was careful to massage the area as he cut the bowel lining. His goal was to get whatever was blocking the bowel opening, but was startled when an influx of waste began to seep out from the cut he had made. It was clear that the clogged feces was spilling out from the new opening to ease the tension in the tiger's bowels. Charles was attentive and slow in his movement. He made sure that the entire valve was cleared out before he focused on the object that was creating the block in the tiger's gut. Once it was clear, Charles nodded. He wasn't surprised by the discovery he made. In fact, he understood how the tiger would have come to eat the object. It was a ball of plastic trays, the kind of trays that animal food was stored in. It was clear the zoo employees had not done their due diligence when feeding the tiger and did not remove the transparent lining. Now that he was certain of the cause, Charles did not hesitate any further. He emptied out the plastic, careful not to damage the thin lining. With meticulous speed, he stitched up the tiger and supplied it with enough liquid to keep it hydrated. Now they would have to hope for a safe recovery. The next day, Charles arrived a little anxious to check on his four-legged patient. He made his way quickly to the tiger's enclave and was shocked to see that the animal was already further along in recovery than he had anticipated. The primary vet explained that they were all shocked by the animal's recovery and thanked Charles for his help rescuing the tiger. Charles smiled broadly. He was glad the tiger was recovering and decided to personally nurse it while they waited for the eventual transport to the zoo that would be its new home. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another unbelievable tale like this one.